I torched off 135 pounds of body fat in 7.5 months. Here's how that actually worked out. Having been fat almost all of my life, there were periods in that time when I wasn't as fat, but I was still very fat most of the time. I started out when I was 7 or 8 years old. That was when they had that big diet craze back in the 70s, and they say fat's the problem. So, fat being the problem, they started filling foods, removing the fat, but filling them with sugar to make it work out and taste palatable so people would eat quite a bit. And there we go. My mom was always trying to lose that 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds, whatever it was. So I joined in, and again, I started growing pretty well when I was about 7 or 8 years old. So my mom was making my own clothes for me, stitching them all together. And you can imagine that bullying that ensued because you got this fat kid wearing horizontal striped shirts. And yeah, it was rough. But getting through that, that wasn't enough to change it. Then getting through the next 45, 43 years until my 50s, that didn't change it either. But what ended up happening was I had a doctor that happened to mention a book called The Obesity Code by Jason Fung. So very simply, I read it. For the next year, I practiced fasting. Lots of different fasting. Intermittent means you're going to resume eating at some point. But it's a little misleading because intermittent to me seems a very short duration. I had much longer fasts, 10 and 14-day fasts, water only at that particular time. And they did me very well and it worked, but I just didn't start out that way. The other thing that I'll point out, if you are going to embark in fasting and you do your research and you start to study online, there are several different types of fasting. We've heard of the intermittent fasting. Then there's all sorts of different fasts that you can abstain from various things. One of the new things that might be something that people are going to need to start doing more of is fasting from social media and the internet. Here I am talking on that platform, but again, something you might consider. But let's get back to torching off body fat. Whenever I started to use the fasting, my issue was always the refeed. So when it came time for me to eat again, I would mess that up. I would eat so much it would make bigger people, even larger than I was, feel ashamed. I would put out away that much food, which again nullified a lot of the good that I did during that fast. It wasn't until I was able to get the breakfast or break fast meal, the meal that breaks your fast, that's where the name comes from. It's not the first in the morning, it's whenever you have it. Whenever I was able to get that meal in line, that's when I truly started to transform myself. And that's when the weight and the fat really started to come off. Now, I say weight because whenever you are losing weight, you have to be careful that you try to limit the muscle loss. With fasting, you're going to lose it. With caloric restriction, at least as far as my studies go, you lose even more muscle. So fasting is really benefit if you want to take care of and sustain the muscle that you have. Now, you can watch all sorts of different sources. Some people give a particular amount of muscle that you lose. But again, also they say that these certain drugs help you lose weight. A lot of those drugs help you lose muscle and fat. But then there are questions to be asked if you maintain your muscle when you're lifting while you're fasting and so on, which I was able to work out completely during any one of my fasts, even dry fasting, which is something you should look into. A resource for that would be dryfastingclub.com. That cat talks a lot about it, and he's kind of breaking into that world. As back in the day, I remember regular fasting, not eating for extended periods of time, was so taboo. People never talked about it online because they were concerned about lawsuits and getting sued. And of course, anything you do, you should follow it up with your doctor before you do it and say, hey, Jack, Dr. Jack, let me know if this is going to be okay for me. And then ask that doctor if they had 50 pounds to lose, what would they do? And more than likely, if they're honest, they're probably going to say, well, probably put the fork down for different periods of time. Once you do that, your body goes into or taps into the stored body fat. That's what it uses for fuel. Your body can either burn sugar, and again, look this up, or it can burn stored body fat. To be able to get to the body fat, though, you have to stop the sugar. And you can stop it by not eating carbohydrates anymore or sugar. That more than likely is going to put you in a state called ketosis. You probably heard this. This came through the Atkins diet all those years ago. It's basically eating very little in the form of carbohydrates, keeping your insulin low. When that happens biologically, your body switches mechanisms from burning the sugar The incoming sugar, glucose, carbohydrates for fuel. It switches from that and burns stored body fat. But then you eat a candy bar during that process, and then you're back to burning the incoming sugar, so your fat stays protected. You don't want to protect it, you want to get rid of it. Because you having that extra body fat on your system, and take it from me, fat guy all my life, that extra body fat is a storage problem. I've eaten too much, so I'm storing more food than I need to have stored on my body. When my waist was 65 inches, that's a lot of stored food. 135 pounds of stored food. And I still have stored food, but again, nowhere near as much as I did. And I was able to torch that off with the fasting. Now, moving into today, after all these, well, not all these years, I started back in when I was 51 years old. Now I'm 54, I'll be 55 coming up in May. When I started the fasting, I knew it was going to be hard. But in order to start, I also needed a why. I needed to figure out what I wanted to do. And I realized after I did one of the longer fasts, that's what made the switch come on. Plus, whenever I start to grab onto something, I try to learn about it as much as possible. Fasting was something that makes me incredibly comfortable, so I consistently learn about different aspects of it, different research, different news articles, listen to the experts talk about it, and even the laymen talk about fasting and how it works so well. So getting through that process, once you get your why answered, figuring out why you're fat, and it's probably because you're eating too much, that's usually the way, or eating too much of the wrong things as well, can put you into that dilemma. Once you've realized this and you're deciding to move away from that, then you have to decide on your strategy. Whatever that strategy is, if it is fasts, maybe eating 3 days out of the week and fasting 4, who would have thought? Or maybe eating every other day, that could be something, but at least find out what works. And I know people out there say, oh, you want to lose it gently, you don't want to lose it fast. I was of the mindset to get this off as quickly as possible. I didn't want to wait anymore. I didn't want to make it last 2 or 3 years to burn off 135 pounds. And I saw that not eating anything was the fastest way to lose fat. And that's what I realized, and that's what I went with. Now, the lifting, the testosterone therapy, those were things that were very important as well, because I started the process getting my hormones in line. And I had very low testosterone in my 50s, as most men in their 50s do. So I went to a doctor, they checked my levels, I was incredibly low, and that's when I started supplementing with testosterone, which has also been a game changer to building muscle, maintaining muscle, and also combined with fasting, really paid off for me. Now, if you're watching this and you have been struggling with being fat, there is light at the end of the tunnel. But it's something that you have to embrace gently, and also embrace it because you love yourself enough to do it. Understanding your body's going to kick and scream, especially if you haven't missed a meal in a long time. It's going to freak out. It's going to be painful. It's going to give you all sorts of symptoms. It's going to cramp you up. It's going to cause all sorts of problems. It's going to mess up your sleep. But the more you do it, the more your body will adjust, and the leaner you will be able to become. Speak with your doctor, see what they say. Do your online research. Again, Jason Fung, Dr. Jason Fung. He's a nephrologist. Peter Attia, Thomas DeLauer, all of these cats, dryfastingclub.com, all of them have good information to say about fasting, and it might be something you want to investigate. I was fat all my life, ladies and gentlemen. I know the game. I know what it's like to sneak food. I know what it's like to be on autopilot at a drive-thru, just eating all the tacos I could eat. I know how that feels, but now I know how it feels to not have that urge anymore, to not care about fulfilling that emotional need with food. I go to other things now, healthier things. I'm Connor with Honor. I hope this helps you. Please leave in the show notes something that says maybe it does or it doesn't, or a topic you want me to talk about. It is my pleasure, and I appreciate you watching. I'm Connor with Honor. Over and out.